In a quiet corner of suburban New York, Mary Johnson's white wooden house exuded a warm, simple charm amidst rows of maple trees ablaze with the vibrant red of spring. The early April sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, casting a glow on the polished oak table that Mary had wiped clean just moments before a habit she had maintained for years. The teapot on the stove hummed softly, the faint aroma of Earl Grey mingling with the gentle afternoon air. At 62, with silver strands in her hair and a kind smile, Mary carefully placed her favorite white porcelain cup on the table. These were the moments she cherished, quiet pauses, where she could feel a sense of peace after long years of widowhood, raising her only son Alex and dedicating her life to the art of wedding planning. Mary had once been a prominent figure in New York's event planning scene. For 35 years, she had turned dreams into reality, from rustic weddings in upstate New York to lavish galas in Manhattan, where crystal chandeliers reflected off dazzling gowns. Each wedding was a story, and Mary was the storyteller, meticulously arranging every detail to create unforgettable memories. But above all, she had always dreamed of a day more special than any other: Alex's wedding, the son for whom she had sacrificed everything. The wedding fund, a sum of $200,000 that she and her late husband William had painstakingly saved through years of hardship, was a testament to her love and sacrifice. It was not just money. It was dreams, deferred trips never taken, gifts forgone to secure her son's future. That day, Alex walked into the kitchen, his demeanor restless. At 30, tall and broad-shouldered, with his father's green eyes and a radiant smile that Mary always saw as the light of her life, he sat down, fidgeting with his phone, his foot tapping the wooden floor. Mary smiled, assuming her son was merely stressed from his tech job. She poured tea, set the cup before him, and asked, "Are you okay, honey? You seem uneasy." Alex looked up, taking a deep breath. "Mom," he said, his voice slightly trembling, "I proposed to Sophia, and she said yes." Time seemed to stand still. Mary felt her heart pound, a mix of pain and sweetness flooding her chest. She looked at Alex, seeing pride tinged with nervousness in his eyes. "Oh, Alex," she whispered, tears welling up. She stood, enveloping her son in a tight embrace, feeling the warmth of the child she had devoted her life to protecting. "I'm so happy for you. This is wonderful, sweetheart." In that moment, Mary saw a world of possibilities unfold. She envisioned herself standing in a grand hall, soft lights illuminating Sophia's pristine white wedding dress, fresh flowers lining the aisle, and Alex in a sharp suit smiling at her from the altar. She saw herself not just as the groom's mother, but as the architect of a dream, as she had been for hundreds of other couples. This would be a family wedding where she could bring her expertise, love, and the savings she had carefully preserved to make it a reality. "I've waited for this day for so long," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Can I help with anything? I still have my old contacts, wonderful vendors and ideas. I won't interfere, lend a hand a little." But then Alex's expression shifted. He looked down at the table, his fingers pausing on his phone. "Actually," he said slowly, "Sophia has her own ideas. She's into modern minimalist stuff, not really what you used to do. She follows this planner on Instagram and she's really famous. Sophia wants to reach out to her." Mary blinked, trying to process her son's words. "Oh," she said softly, her heart beginning to ache. "But it's a family event. I wanted to be part of some decisions, just a few small ones." Alex hesitated, then looked out the window, avoiding her gaze. Sophia said, "And don't take it wrong, but she thinks it's better if you stay in your lane, so things remain clear, no confusion." The words hit like a knife. "Stay in your lane." Mary repeated them, her smile stiffening. She waited, hoping Alex would laugh and say it was a joke, that Sophia didn't mean it. But he only nodded, his voice quiet. "She wants everything to go smoothly. You get it right, Mom." Mary didn't understand. She didn't want to. She smiled, a forced smile, like a mask hiding the pain swelling within her. "Of course," she said evenly. "I understand." But inside, her initial joy shattered like a glass cup hitting the floor. She excused herself, claiming a Zoom call with an old friend from her wedding planning days. In truth, she just needed to escape. With the lights off in her bedroom, Mary sat on the bed, watching the sky darken through the window. She thought of the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights worrying about Alex, the savings soaked in sweat and tears. All for a cold command: stay in your lane. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because the pain was too vast, too sharp, numbing her. She told herself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Sophia didn't mean it that way. Maybe Alex was avoiding conflict. But deep down, a crack had formed. Mary felt the first sting of betrayal, not just from Sophia, but from her son, the one she had loved and protected her entire life. She gazed out the window, the faint moonlight casting shadows on the trembling maple branches. "I'm worth more than this," she whispered to herself, her voice frail but resolute. It was the first moment Mary realized that to protect herself, she would have to learn to set boundaries, a journey she never imagined she'd have to take. Have you ever felt excluded from essential family moments? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and I'd love to hear about your journey. In the days following Alex's joyful news, Mary's white wooden house in suburban New York grew quieter than ever. Each morning she rose early brewing coffee in the old mocha pot William, her late husband, had given her for their 10th anniversary. The steam from the coffee mingled with the scent of pine from the open windows, but it couldn't dispel the emptiness in Mary's heart. Sophia's words, "Stay in your lane," echoed in her mind like a mournful melody that clung stubbornly, refusing to fade. Mary tried to convince herself it was an offhand remark, that Alex was still the son who hugged her every time he came home, but each glance at the silent phone on the table felt like a vice tightening around her heart. Mary settled into the old armchair in the living room where she and William used to read together on weekend evenings. She opened a notebook filled with past wedding ideas, elegant color schemes, bouquets of carnations paired with white daisies, and lighting arrangements to create a romantic ambiance. She flipped through the pages, her fingers tracing carefully handwritten notes and meticulous sketches she'd spent hours perfecting. "I could do this for Alex," she whispered, clinging to the hope that she still had a place in her son's big day. But deep down, she knew things were changing, not just the wedding, but her bond with Alex. One Saturday afternoon, Mary received a text from Sophia. "Mrs. Mary, we're meeting at Bluebird Cafe in Manhattan this week to discuss wedding vibes. Can you come?" The message was curt, almost cold, but Mary felt a spark of hope. She spent the morning preparing, choosing a light blue blouse and small silver earrings Alex had given her for a birthday. She brought a slim folder with simple ideas, a suggestion for using seasonal flowers to save costs, a list of trusted New York lighting vendors, and a concept for table arrangements to foster intimacy. No pressure, she told herself, just support. Bluebird Cafe was bustling with soft jazz playing from the speakers. As Mary entered, she saw Sophia seated with her mother Laura and three young friends, all glued to their phones. Sophia glanced up, offering a faint smile. "Hi, Mrs. Mary," then quickly returned to her screen. Laura nodded, her lips pursed in a tight, forced smile. Mary sat down, trying to ignore the sense of being out of place. She ordered tea, placed her folder on the table, and waited for a chance to speak. The conversation began, but not as Mary expected. Sophia and her friends discussed new trends, color-changing LED lights, artificial flowers imported from Europe, and a Los Angeles planner with a groundbreaking style that Sophia adored. "She did a desert wedding with dried flowers and neon lights, totally epic," one friend exclaimed. Mary smiled, attempting to join in. "I brought some ideas in case they're helpful." She opened her folder, pointing to a photo of a white and gold floral arrangement. "These are versatile and suitable for any season." Sophia didn't even glance down. She waved a hand, her tone light but sharp. "Thanks, but we're going for something more modern. Not so traditional." The word traditional was emphasized as if it were an insult. Sophia's friends giggled, and Laura whispered to one of them, "I told you she'd bring outdated stuff." Mary heard but pretended not to. She closed the folder, gripping the table's edge to stay composed. "Of course," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to help." Driving home, Mary sat in her car, watching the Manhattan crowds pass by. The radio played an old Frank Sinatra song, but she didn't hear it. She felt like a part of herself had been stripped away, not just her expertise, but the love and sacrifice she'd poured into Alex. She thought of the sleepless nights comforting him through high school heartbreaks, the overtime shifts to pay for his college, the wedding fund she and William had carefully built. It seemed meaningless now, faced with Sophia's coldness and Alex's silence. That night, Mary sat alone in the dining room, the glow from the old chandelier highlighting the wrinkles she once wore with pride, marks of a life of effort. She opened her phone and scrolled through old texts with Alex's cheerful messages, photos from his job, and thank yous for care packages. But 3 days had passed since the Bluebird meeting, and Alex hadn't called or texted. The ache spread not because of Sophia, but because of Alex, the son she thought would always need her. She stepped onto the small back porch, the cool spring breeze carrying the scent of lilacs from the neighbor's garden. Mary hugged herself, trying to hold back tears. What did I do wrong, she asked herself. But then another thought crept in. Or have I done too much? She reflected on the years of sacrifice, always putting Alex's happiness above hers. And now, wanting to share in his joy, she was pushed aside, deemed irrelevant. Mary looked up at the sky stars, twinkling faintly amidst the city lights. She remembered William, who always said, "Mary, you deserve to be loved, not just as a mother, but as you." Those words, though years old, became a reminder. Mary took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. She knew she couldn't keep waiting for validation from Alex or Sophia. To preserve her worth, she had to act not out of revenge, but to protect her heart. She returned inside, pulling a new notebook from a drawer. On the first page, she wrote, "Tomorrow begin again." It wasn't a promise to Alex or Sophia, but to herself, a declaration that she would not let herself be erased. The crack in her relationship with her son had formed, but Mary knew that she had to learn to stand on her own first to heal. In the days following the hurtful meeting at Bluebird Cafe, Mary tried to reclaim her daily rhythm in her white wooden house in suburban New York. But she felt an invisible void each morning as sunlight streamed through the windows, reflecting off the family photos on the living room walls. Pictures of young Alex beaming beside his first red bicycle or wearing his high school graduation cap now served as painful reminders of the growing distance between mother and son. Mary stopped waiting for Alex's texts, but her heart still twinged each time her phone chimed, hoping it was him. She spent more time in her small backyard garden, where rows of yellow daisies and lavender she'd planted during William's lifetime became her sanctuary. Mary carefully pruned and watered, feeling the soft earth under her hands to stay busy and avoid confronting the reality that she was being excluded from her son's life. But in quiet moments, with only birdsong and the rustle of wind through the trees, Sophia's words, "Stay in your lane," resurfaced sharp as a needle piercing her pride. One Wednesday morning, as Mary cleaned her porcelain tea set in the kitchen, her phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. "Mrs. Mary, we're having a small family dinner in Brooklyn this weekend to discuss the wedding. Can you come?" This invitation felt different, more formal, like an olive branch. Mary hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. She recalled the coldness at Bluebird Laura's fake smile, the mocking laughter of Sophia's friends. But then she thought of Alex, his loving gaze from childhood. Maybe this is a chance to mend things, she told herself, pushing aside her doubts. Mary prepared meticulously for the dinner. She chose a simple yet elegant navy dress, her hair neatly combed, accented with a silk scarf that William had said brought out her eyes. She brought a small gift, a jar of homemade blueberry jam from her garden, wrapped in craft paper with a red ribbon. Just a small gesture, she thought, hoping it would ease the tension. Driving through Brooklyn's bustling streets, Mary tried to quell her unease. This is family, she reassured herself. Families always find a way back to each other. Laura's house sat in an upscale neighborhood, its glass facade and minimalist interior exuding modern elegance. As Mary entered, the scent of expensive perfume mixed with red wine. Sophia greeted her with a polite smile, but her eyes lacked warmth. Laura, already tipsy with a wine glass in hand, air-kissed Mary's cheek and said, "Oh, Mary, you made it. I hear you used to plan weddings. That must have been interesting, huh?" Laura's tone was sweet, but interesting was laced with condescension, as if Mary's career was a quaint hobby. Mary smiled, holding her composure. "Yes, for over 30 years. I loved it. Helping families create lasting memories was always special to me." Laura nodded, but her gaze shifted to Sophia, dismissing Mary's response. The dinner began, and Mary quickly realized she was an outsider again. The table was laden with elaborate vegan dishes, kale salad with walnuts, gluten-free bread, and the conversation revolved around things Mary didn't belong to: pastel color palettes, imported LED lights, and a wedding design app Sophia raved about. Mary tried to engage. When Sophia mentioned a light tunnel for the reception entrance, Mary gently offered, "That's a unique idea, but intense lighting can sometimes overwhelm older guests. I once did a wedding with softer lighting that was still stunning." Sophia cut her off, her smile thin as a blade. "Thanks, but we've got someone young in tune with trends handling it." The table fell silent momentarily, and Mary felt her cheeks flush, not from shame, but from a quiet anger. Laura broke the silence, pulling out an old album to show off Sophia's childhood photos, Hampton's vacations, school dances. Sophia beamed, drawing Alex into the stories while he nodded, avoiding his mother's eyes. Mustering courage, Mary pulled a small envelope from her purse containing photos of Alex, a toddler in a Halloween costume, his gap-toothed grin on his first bike ride. "I thought these might work for the slideshow," she said softly. "They're special to me." Sophia glanced at them, then shrugged. "Cute, but we want a more polished vibe, curated. These are a bit ordinary." The word ordinary stung like a slap. Mary clutched the envelope, swallowing her pain. This is Alex's childhood, she wanted to scream. This is my son, my family. But she said nothing, quietly tucking the photos away, a forced smile on her lips. As the dinner ended, Laura hugged Mary with one arm, her wine glass in the other. Sophia waved from afar, and Alex escorted his mother to the door. On the stoop, he whispered, "Sorry if tonight was awkward. Sophia's under a lot of pressure. Her mom, social media, everyone's expectations." Mary looked at her son, seeing exhaustion in his eyes, not from work, but from balancing two worlds. "What are you sacrificing to keep things smooth?" "Alex," she asked, her voice gentle but sharp. He didn't answer, only lowered his head. Mary kissed his cheek and walked away. In the car, Mary kept the radio off. The lights from Laura's house glowed beautiful, but lifeless, like a painting without soul. She realized she wasn't excluded for lacking value, but because she represented what Sophia didn't want to see: depth, memory, authenticity. Back home, Mary stood before the bathroom mirror, studying her face. The wrinkles, the silver hair, the eyes still bright despite the hurt. "You're not surplus," she whispered. It was the first time she felt the power of self-liberation, a faint spark in the darkness. The weeks after the dinner at Laura's house, Mary's white wooden home in suburban New York became a refuge and prison of endless thoughts. Each morning she woke with a heaviness, as if the air in the house had thickened with Alex's silence and Sophia's coldness. She kept herself busy polishing family photo frames, reorganizing old bookshelves, cooking dishes Alex loved as a child, like pumpkin soup or butter cookies. But every time she opened the fridge and saw the untouched jar of blueberry jam, Sophia's polite but indifferent gift, Mary felt a dull ache in her chest. She no longer checked her phone constantly, but each time the screen lit up, her heart beat faster, hoping for a message from Alex. Instead, there were only notifications from old friends or store ads. Mary realized that her son's silence wasn't accidental, it was a choice. And that choice, though unspoken, cut deeper into the mother-son bond that had once been her lifeline. One rainy afternoon, sitting in her armchair with a novel she wasn't reading, Mary decided to try again. She told herself, "I can't give up so easily," thinking of the years she'd sacrificed for Alex, from overtime shifts to pay for his tuition to sleepless nights when he was sick. She opened her laptop and drafted a brief email for Alex and Sophia. The tone was gentle, non-intrusive, a list of trusted New York vendors from bakers to florists. She ended with suggestions if you need them, wishing you both joy in the planning. Love, Mom. Mary hit send, feeling a flicker of relief. But days passed with no reply, no thank you, no sign the email was read. The silence was like an invisible wall separating her from her son and the dream of a family wedding. She tried to reassure herself. Maybe they're busy. Maybe Sophia wants to handle it all. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the reason. She was being pushed out of her own son's story. Determined not to let rejection defeat her, Mary tried another approach. She rummaged through the attic for an old box containing Alex's keepsakes, a photo album from his childhood cards he'd drawn for Mother's Day, and a Little League baseball medal. She carefully packed them, thinking they could be used for a small display at the wedding, to weave family memories into the big day. Mary drove to Alex's apartment in Queens, her heart pounding with hope that she'd be welcomed this time. Sophia answered the door dressed in trendy athletic wear, her hair tied high, her smile as cold as the phone screen's glow. "Hi, Mrs. Mary," she said, standing in the doorway, not inviting her in. Mary held up the box, smiling. "I brought some of Alex's things, such as old photos and small keepsakes, which might work for a slideshow or decor." Sophia took the box, her eyes barely leaving her phone. "Thanks, but we're doing a digital slideshow in a modern style. We don't need these." Her tone was light, but each word stung like a pinprick. Mary nodded, keeping her voice steady. "I understand. Some childhood photos of Alex might be sweet." Sophia shrugged, and Alex appeared from inside, looking tired. "Mom," he said, giving her a quick hug. "You didn't need to bring this in person. You could have mailed it." Mary's heart tightened. "I was in the area," she lied, forcing a smile. "Have you found a venue?" Sophia answered promptly. "Yeah, a rooftop downtown. Very us chic, but not stuffy." Mary nodded, then tried one last time. "I know a Hudson Valley garden perfect for outdoor ceremonies. The owners are old friends." Sophia's smile tightened. "Thanks, but we're avoiding anything too traditional, parent-style weddings." Mary gave a strained laugh, feeling slapped. She said goodbye, leaving before the door fully closed. On the way home, she stopped by a small park, sitting in her car as rain tapped the windshield. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She thought of the wedding fund, $200,000 she and William had saved for going trips and luxuries for this day. But now it didn't seem very sensible. It couldn't buy respect or a place in Alex's or Sophia's hearts. At home, Mary sat at the kitchen table opening an old notebook of wedding plans. Pages filled with colorful notes, floral sketches, guest lists, and tips for warm ceremonies. She flipped through, feeling the passion she'd poured into her work. But now it only reminded her she was no longer needed. What did I do wrong, she asked herself, but no answer came. She stood walking to the bookshelf, pulling out a photo of her and Alex at a picnic years ago. He sat on William's shoulders, grinning while Mary hugged them both. Family, she whispered, her finger tracing Alex's joyful face. But now that family felt like a memory. A quiet anger stirred not at Sophia, but at herself for letting herself become invisible to her son. She returned the photo to the shelf. No more, she said firmly. Mary knew that continuing to push into a place that didn't welcome her would mean losing herself. This was her last unreciprocated effort. She would learn to protect her heart from now on, even if it meant facing greater pain. The days after visiting Alex's apartment in Queens brought a quiet shift in Mary. Her white wooden house in suburban New York, once a haven brimming with family memories, now felt like a faded painting, its outlines dimmed by time. Each morning she rose early brewing tea in her old porcelain pot, but the soothing scent of mint couldn't ease the emptiness. Sophia's words, "stay in your lane," were no longer just a rejection, but a verdict declaring Mary's place outside her son's story. Yet this time, instead of clinging, Mary began to question whether she was sacrificing too much for something no longer hers. She sat in the living room armchair, morning light streaming through the window, highlighting dust motes in the air. A small wooden box sat on the table, William's last gift before passing. Inside was the wedding fund's savings book, $200,000 painstakingly saved over the years. Mary opened it, her fingers brushing the yellowed pages where William had written, "For Alex's day. Make it unforgettable." Each figure was a story: months of overtime to buy Alex's school books, William skipping a new car to save, and the lonely holidays when Mary stayed home to keep her promise of a perfect wedding for their son. But now, staring at the savings book, Mary no longer saw the dream. She saw years of sacrifice, personal aspirations set aside, and the silent betrayal from Alex, who chose to stand by Sophia rather than defend his mother. She closed the box, but didn't put it away. Instead, she placed it on the kitchen table beside her silent phone, still unanswered since her last email. "I've done enough," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Mary knew that continuing to give without being valued would mean losing herself. That day, she drove to a bank in downtown New York. The air inside was chilly, filled with the clack of keyboards and the monotone voices of tellers. Mary stood at the counter, clutching the savings book, feeling at a crossroads. "I want to withdraw part of the funds and transfer them to a personal account," she told the young teller, who nodded and began typing. She left $5,000 in the wedding fund, a symbolic amount enough to maintain appearances, but not enough to tie her to a dream no longer hers. The rest went to her own account, a quiet but powerful act. To Mary, it wasn't just a transaction. It was a declaration she would not let her love be used as a tool. On the way home, Mary stopped by a small park. The rain had cleared, leaving shimmering puddles. She stepped out, breathing the fresh air, feeling a strange freedom fill her chest. For the first time in months, she felt no guilt for putting herself first. She thought of William, who always said love wasn't unconditional sacrifice, but a mutual choice. "You'd be proud of me," she whispered, gazing at the clear sky. That night, Mary sat at the dining table writing a short letter. "Dear Alex and Sophia, I wish you a beautiful wedding in your own way. Here's a small gift from me, hoping you'll cherish it. Love, Mom." She tucked a $5,000 check into an envelope, sealed it, and mailed it. As the mailbox lid closed, Mary felt a burden lift. She didn't need thanks or validation. She only needed to know she'd drawn a line not for revenge, but to protect her worth. The following days, Mary waited for a response from Alex or Sophia, but no one came, no call, no text. The silence, instead of hurting, reinforced her decision. She realized the betrayal wasn't just Sophia's, but Alex's, who chose silence over standing up for her. Mary didn't hate her son, she loved him too much for that, but she grieved a deep sadness for the love that couldn't keep him close. To fill the void, Mary sought joy in small things. She joined a yoga class at the community center where slow movements helped her reconnect with her body. She met Helen, an old friend from her wedding planning days, and they laughed over coffee about memories. One afternoon, strolling through a farmer's market, Mary bought a bouquet of white daisies, placing them in a glass vase on her dining table. For me, she smiled, feeling a lightness she'd long lost. But in quiet moments, with dim light casting shadows on the ceiling, Mary still thought of Alex. She recalled evenings when he studied at the kitchen table, her baking cookies as he shared dreams of becoming an engineer. She remembered his smile when he was accepted into college, the tight hug he gave her. "You're the best mom," he'd said. But now he was a man caught in Sophia's world where Mary had no place. Standing before her bedroom mirror, Mary looked into her eyes, still bright now, with a hint of resolve. "You don't need to be everything to them," she told her reflection. "You're enough." It was the moment she realized that to move forward, she had to let go of expecting Alex to return to who he was. She had to learn to love him from afar, without allowing that love to wound her. Mary returned to the kitchen table, opening her old wedding notebook. But this time, instead of writing about flowers or lighting, she wrote, "Today I choose myself." It wasn't giving up, it was a new beginning. One where Mary would no longer let herself be erased by those who couldn't see her value. The days after mailing the $5,000 check, Mary's white wooden house in suburban New York felt larger, no longer a prison of pain. Each morning she woke with an odd sense of relief, as if setting boundaries had freed her from an invisible burden. Spring sunlight filtered through linen curtains, illuminating the dining table where Mary placed a vase of fresh white daisies. She brewed coffee, no longer rushing to check her phone for Alex's messages. The silence from her son and Sophia no longer stung as it once did. It became confirmation that her decision was right. She could no longer sacrifice for those who didn't value her. Mary began rediscovering herself. She joined a local book club, reading novels she'd neglected for years while tending to family. She tried painting, and her first brushstrokes were mere scribbles on paper. These weren't just time fillers, but ways to reclaim the woman who once loved life, laughed freely, and dreamed before becoming a mother who gave everything. Yet, in quiet moments alone on the porch with a cold tea, she felt a void only Alex could fill. One evening, as Mary pruned plants in her garden, her phone buzzed. Alex's name flashed on the screen, and her heart raced, not with hope, but with a foreboding. She answered calmly, "Alex, are you okay?" His voice trembled hoarse. "Mom, we're in big trouble." Mary paused, still holding the pruning shears. "What happened?" she asked evenly, though a wave rose within her. Alex's voice broke as he explained. He and Sophia had signed a contract with a famous Instagram wedding planner, Isabella Rose, for $55,000, money borrowed and taken from personal savings. They were swept up in Isabella's glamorous videos and millions of followers. "She seemed so professional, Mom." Sophia said she only takes a few clients a year. We had to act fast. But now Isabella was gone. Her website was down, her phone disconnected, and her Instagram was wiped. "Our money. It's all gone," Alex said, his voice breaking. "The wedding. It's canceled." Mary sat on the garden bench, the air suddenly heavy. She wasn't surprised, but the pain lingered, not for the money, but for her son, once the light of her life, now shattered by reckless choices. "What does Sophia say?" she asked softly. Alex paused, then whispered, "She blames me. Says if you'd paid, this wouldn't have happened." The words cut like a knife. Mary clenched her fist, suppressing anger. "And what do you think, Alex?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. "Should I pay to fix your decisions?" Alex didn't answer immediately. "I don't know, Mom," he said finally. "I just don't know what to do." Mary breathed deeply, the cold air filling her lungs. "I can't fix this for you," she said. "This is the consequence of your and Sophia's choices." After the call, Mary sat silently in the garden, watching the white daisies sway in the breeze. She felt no satisfaction or triumph. Instead, she pitied Alex, not for the failed wedding, but for letting himself be swept into a world where image trumped everything. She thought of Sophia, who dismissed her expertise, and Alex, who stayed silent to keep the peace. Their betrayal wasn't just excluding her from the wedding, but rejecting the values she tried to instill: sincerity, caution, and family love. Mary heard rumors through Helen, her old friend, from the wedding planning in the following days. Sophia had moved back to her mother's in Brooklyn, leaving Alex alone in their apartment. The wedding was postponed indefinitely, but everyone knew it was a cover. Their relationship was crumbling. Vendors refused refunds, and tensions turned into bitter arguments. Mary didn't intervene. She didn't call or text Alex. She'd learned that love couldn't be forced, and her help wasn't welcome while they chased illusions. To keep from sinking into sadness, Mary spent more time on herself. She enrolled in a pottery class at the community center, shaping clay into imperfect but meaningful bowls. She walked along the Hudson River feeling the cool breeze and warm sun on her face. On a park bench one afternoon, Mary watched a young mother push her daughter on a swing. The girls' laughter echoed, and Mary smiled, recalling pushing Alex on their backyard swing. But this time the memory didn't hurt. It reminded her she'd been a wonderful mother and could still live meaningfully with or without Alex's presence. That night, Mary sat at the kitchen table, opening the notebook she'd begun during her self-liberation. She wrote, "Today I forgave myself for trying too hard, loving too much, waiting too long." She didn't write about Alex or Sophia nor the wedding. Instead, she wrote about herself, the woman learning to stand tall without needing anyone's validation. Mary knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. She'd drawn a line not to push Alex away, but to pull herself back to a Mary who was strong, confident, and unafraid of being forgotten. After Alex's painful call, Mary's white wooden house in suburban New York became a tranquil oasis amidst an emotional storm. Morning light still filtered gently through the curtains, illuminating family photos on the wooden shelf, but Mary no longer lingered on Alex's childhood smile. The pain of his betrayal and the collapse of his wedding with Sophia was no longer a bleeding wound. It had become a scar still there, but no longer causing her to flinch. Mary had learned to step lightly, not to forget, but to survive. She began each day with a new ritual, journaling. Every morning, after brewing a cup of chamomile tea, Mary sat by the window, opening a green leather notebook she'd bought at a small shop near the Hudson River. She didn't write about Alex or Sophia, but about small things that made her smile: the scent of wet earth after rain, the chirping of sparrows in the garden, the feel of soft clay in her pottery class. These words weren't an escape from reality, but a reminder that her life was still worth living even without her son's acknowledgement. One afternoon, while strolling through a farmer's market near her home, Mary ran into Helen, her old friend from her wedding planning days. With her curly, dyed blonde hair and ever-bright smile, Helen pulled Mary into a tight hug. "You look good, Mary," Helen said, her eyes sparkling. "Heard about Alex and Sophia. It's all fallen apart." Mary nodded, reluctant to delve into details. But Helen, unable to curb her curiosity, continued. "Sophia's back with her mom. Rumor is she's blaming Alex, saying he mishandled the money. And Alex, he looks lost, poor guy." Mary listened but didn't respond. She bought a bunch of spinach and some apples, then parted with Helen with a faint smile. Walking home, she let the rustle of leaves underfoot fill the silence. She felt no glee at Alex and Sophia's breakup. Instead, a deep sadness settled in, not for Sophia, but for Alex, who had let himself be swept into a superficial world where grandiose expectations overshadowed love. But Mary knew she couldn't save her son from the lessons he had to learn himself. That evening, Mary hosted a small dinner at home, inviting two friends from her yoga class. Clara, a retired teacher with a sharp wit, and Joan, an amateur painter, always tinged with the scent of oil paint. Mary prepared a simple meal: pasta with homemade tomato sauce, a green salad, and a bottle of white wine saved for a special occasion. As the three women sat around the table, warm lamplight highlighting their smiles and laughter, Mary felt a connection she hadn't experienced in years. They talked about a good book, a new movie, and Clara's hiking trip in the Adirondacks. No one mentioned Alex or the wedding, and Mary was grateful. In that moment, Mary realized she didn't need to be Alex's mom to be loved. She could be Mary, the woman who could cook a delicious meal, listen attentively, and find joy in small things. As Clara and Joan left, they hugged her, saying, "Thanks for tonight. It's been ages since we laughed this much." Mary stood at the door watching their car lights fade, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She was building a new life, not reliant on others' validation. In the following days, Mary explored parts of herself she'd forgotten. She joined a writing workshop at the library, penning stories from her wedding planning career, a bride who cried over a torn dress and how Mary stitched it back together, late-night office hours with only desk lamps for company, and the joy of seeing couples exchange loving glances. These stories weren't just memories, but a way to affirm her worth, a worth Sophia and Alex had overlooked. One morning, while watering her garden, Mary got a text from a community center acquaintance, heard about Isabella Rose. She's been exposed as a fraud. Not just Alex and Sophia, 4 other couples lost money too. Mary set down the watering can, gazing at the maples turning golden. She wasn't surprised. In her 35 years in the industry, she'd seen every kind of scam, from ghost vendors to shady contracts. But she didn't call or text Alex. She knew he needed time to face his mistakes. That night, Mary sat by the fireplace, its crackling light dancing on her face. She opened her notebook, writing, "I learned to let go, not today of Alex, but of the pain. I don't need to fix everything." She thought of the wedding fund, once a symbol of her love for her son. Now she saw that love wasn't about account numbers, but respect and sharing. Alex and Sophia had chosen their path, and Mary had chosen hers, one of self-liberation. Mary stood on her porch as night fell, staring at the starry sky. The cool breeze carried the scent of approaching autumn. She thought of William, who once said, "Mary, you're a flame that never fades." Those words became a torch lighting her path. Mary knew that whether Alex returned or not, she'd found a part of herself no one, not even her son, could take away. Autumn arrived in suburban New York, bringing cool breezes and the vibrant gold of maple trees outside Mary's home. Once a cage for silent pain, the white wooden house became a healing space. Each morning, Mary woke at dawn, brewing coffee and sitting by the window watching dew glisten on the grass. The silence from Alex and news of his breakup with Sophia were no longer daggers in her heart. Instead, they reminded her she'd been right to set boundaries, refusing to be swept into the storm of those who didn't value her. Mary found joy in new routines. She joined a hiking group with community center friends, exploring hidden trails in the Catskills. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the wind through the trees, and her steady breaths blended into a melody of freedom. She no longer looked back regretfully, but wrote new chapters for herself. On a hike, standing on a hill overlooking a valley ablaze with fall colors, Mary whispered, "You've come this far." The words weren't just about the physical journey, but the inner path she'd traveled. While rearranging her living room bookshelf one afternoon, Mary found an old notebook from her early wedding planning days. Its yellowed pages noted flower choices, color palettes, and tips for calming nervous brides. She smiled not out of nostalgia, but because she realized she'd once been a strong, creative, passionate woman. She didn't tuck the notebook away, but placed it on the table, a reminder that the old Mary was still within her, waiting to be reawakened. Mary tried something new that evening, signing up for an online creative writing course. She began recounting life stories not about Alex or Sophia, but moments that shaped her first wedding for a budget-strapped couple, turning a barn into a romantic space with wildflowers and homemade lanterns, or staying up all night to mend a torn wedding dress to see the bride's radiant smile. Writing these stories wasn't just reminiscing, but affirming her enduring value, even if unrecognized. One day at the farmer's market, Mary ran into Clara, her yoga class friend. Clara, with her warm smile and playful eyes, pulled Mary aside. "Heard anything?" she asked, curious. "About Alex and Sophia," Mary nodded, bracing for familiar gossip. Clara continued, "Sophia's telling everyone Alex ruined everything, bad planner choice, bad money management. But I heard from a friend that they were fighting before that. Sophia wanted total control, and Alex, he just wanted peace." Mary listened, feeling neither anger nor satisfaction, only a gentle sadness, like watching a ship sink under its weight. "Thanks for telling me," she said evenly, "but Alex needs to find his own way." Clara looked at Mary, eyes full of admiration. "You've changed, Mary. So much stronger." Mary smiled without replying, but inside she knew Clara was right. She was no longer the mother who only sacrificed waiting for validation. She was Mary, a woman learning to love herself. That night, Mary hosted a small gathering for close friends from her book club and pottery class. She baked an apple pie, and its cinnamon scent filled the kitchen. As they sat around the table, candlelight glowing on their faces, Mary felt a connection absent for years. They shared stories of trips, favorite books, and pottery class mishaps. The amateur painter Joan laughed about a vase she shattered in the kiln, and the group roared. Mary realized these simple, authentic moments were what she'd sought in the lavish weddings she planned, now found in her own home. As her friends left, Mary washed dishes in the kitchen, the hanging lamp highlighting the wrinkles on her hands, marks of labor and love. She thought of Alex, how he'd been swept into Sophia's world, and how she'd once been caught in the expectation of being a perfect mother. But now she no longer needed to save her son or fix his mistakes. She'd let go not out of anger, but because she understood true love didn't demand blind sacrifice. Before bed, Mary opened her green notebook, writing, "Today I found joy in myself, not for who I am to others, but for being me." She closed it, placing it beside a photo of her and William on their wedding day years ago. William's smile seemed to say, "You did it, Mary." She smiled, turned off the light, and slept soundly for the first time in months, undisturbed by dreams of Alex or Sophia. Mary woke with a new purpose as morning light flooded the house. She no longer waited for Alex's call or hoped for an apology. She knew her son had to find his path, and so did she. Stepping into the garden where the white daisies were beginning to fade but still beautiful, Mary picked up a fallen petal, holding it gently, feeling a deep peace. She'd found herself not the forgotten mother or dismissed planner, but Mary, a strong woman ready to live for herself. Autumn in suburban New York grew more vibrant as the maple trees turned red and orange like flames lighting the road to Mary's white wooden house. The crisp air, carrying the scent of dry leaves and earth, seemed to soothe the hidden corners of her soul. Mary had grown accustomed to the quiet, no longer checking her phone hourly for a sign from Alex. Instead, she found solace in new routines, morning reading by the window pottery classes, where she shaped imperfect but inspired bowls, and evenings writing, piecing together fragments of her life. Yet deep down, she kept a corner of her heart open, not for waiting, but for the day Alex might return. One late October afternoon, as Mary watered the last daisies of the season in her garden, footsteps on the gravel path made her look up. Alex stood at the gate, thinner, his eyes carrying a weariness, not just from tough days. He wore an old jacket, hands in pockets, his gaze hesitant, unsure of his welcome. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, "can I come in?" Mary set down the watering can, her heart racing not from anger or pain, but from a complex mix of familiarity and distance, like meeting an old friend after years apart. She opened the gate, nodding, "Come in, honey. I was about to make tea." Alex smiled a weak but genuine smile and followed her inside. In the kitchen, light from the hanging lamp bathed the wooden table where Mary set out a tray of freshly baked cookies. She poured tea into 2 porcelain cups, the minty aroma spreading a simple warmth. They sat across from each other, neither rushing to speak. Mary looked at her son, noting new lines on his face, small wrinkles at his eyes, a quietness in his gaze. He was no longer the boy who ran around the backyard begging her to push the swing. He was a man bearing the scars of poor choices. "What did you want to talk about?" Mary finally asked, her voice gentle but direct. Alex took a deep breath, twirling his teacup. I want to apologize for everything, for not speaking up when she disrespected you, for making you feel unimportant." His words rang with sincerity, not excuses. Mary listened, a small wave stirring in her heart, but she stayed silent, letting him continue. "I met someone," Alex said, his eyes brightening slightly. "Her name's Emma. She's different from Sophia. Emma. She asked about you from the start. Not about the wedding, but about you, the woman who raised me. She said she wants to meet you, to know you." Mary blinked, feeling a door creak open in her heart. "And you?" she asked softly. "What do you want, Alex?" He looked into her eyes, his voice steadier. "I want to do it right now. I want you in my life, not just as my mom, but because you're you, the one who's always been there even when I didn't deserve it." His words touched Mary not because they erased the hurt, but because they were an invitation, a true one, not an obligation or expectation. Mary smiled, placing her hand on Alex's. "I'd love to meet Emma," she said, meaning it. They talked not about Sophia or Isabella Rose's scam, but about simple things, Alex's job, a book he was reading, a new cafe in Queens he thought she'd like. When Alex left, he hugged her tighter than usual, and Mary felt a connection she thought was lost forever. In the following days, Mary received a text from Emma. "Hi, Mrs. Mary, I'm Emma. Alex has told me so much about you, and I'd love to meet you. If you're free, I'd like to invite you to lunch this weekend." Emma's tone was warm, genuine, without pretense. Mary agreed, and on a Sunday morning she met Emma at a small Manhattan diner. Emma had soft brown hair, bright eyes, and a warm smile. She didn't talk much about weddings or plans, but asked about Mary, her years as a wedding planner, her garden, and Alex's stories about his mother. Alex said, "You make everything special." Emma said, her eyes sparkling, "If we ever get married, I'd want you to help us, not just because you're Alex's mom, but because you'd make the day meaningful." Her words moved Mary. She felt seen for the first time in months, not as an afterthought, but as someone valued. Mary and Emma grew closer, meeting regularly for coffee and discussing simple wedding ideas, not flashy, just a warm ceremony with close family and friends. Mary carried a new notebook, jotting down suggestions, a small upstate New York garden daisies and lavender for the bride's bouquet, a soft jazz playlist. But what made Mary happy wasn't the planning, it was being invited into a new story where she wasn't pushed aside. That night, Mary sat in the living room fireplace, light glowing on her face. She opened her green notebook, writing, "Today, I was seen not for my sacrifices, but for being me." She thought of Alex, Emma, and her journey from betrayal's pain to self-liberation now, to a new beginning. Mary knew the scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined her. She'd found a new path where love wasn't blind sacrifice but genuine sharing. Closing the notebook, Mary looked out the window, moonlight illuminating the trembling maple branches. She smiled, feeling a deep peace. The road ahead was long, but she walked with a light heart this time, knowing she deserved love from Alex, Emma, and herself. Autumn in suburban New York turned cooler, the maple trees outside Mary's home, shedding leaves, leaving bare branches, beautiful in their resilience. Once a prison of pain and memories, the white wooden house now glowed with light and warmth from new plans. Mary had found peace within herself, no longer bound by expectations or the hurt of Alex and Sophia's betrayal. Meeting Emma opened a new chapter where Mary was not just the groom's mother, but a woman valued for who she was. In the weeks after meeting Emma, Mary and the young woman grew closer. They often met at a small Manhattan cafe where soft light streamed through windows, highlighting Emma's warm smile. They talked about simple things, choosing flowers for an outdoor ceremony, a minimalist vanilla-frosted wedding cake, or Mary's memories from her wedding planning days. But what touched Mary most wasn't the plans, it was how Emma listened, her eyes attentive, as if each of Mary's stories was a precious gift. While reviewing fabric samples for tablecloths one afternoon, Emma looked up, her voice soft. "Mrs. Mary, I know you've done many weddings, but this time, I want it to be special. Not for grandeur, but because it's ours, me, Alex, and you. I want everyone to feel the love, not just between me and Alex, but the love of family." Mary blinked, warmth spreading through her chest. She felt invited and cherished as an essential part for the first time in years. Alex and Emma's wedding was set for an early autumn morning in a small upstate New York garden. Mary helped choose the venue, a lush green space with wildflowers and a babbling brook. As Emma envisioned, there were no flashy LED lights or ostentatious details. Instead, the garden was adorned with hanging lanterns and bouquets of white daisies and lavender. That morning, Mary stood at the garden's edge, watching neatly arranged wooden chairs and guests chatting lively, feeling a peace unlike any from the lavish weddings she'd planned. When Emma emerged in a simple wedding dress with a delicate veil, Mary's heart raced, not for the bride's beauty, but for Emma's glance toward her before walking down the aisle, a gentle smile saying, "Thank you for everything." Alex stood in a deep blue suit at the aisle's end, hands slightly trembling but eyes bright. When he looked at his mother, Mary saw quiet gratitude, no words needed, but enough to heal past scars. The ceremony was simple. No loud applause or staged social media moments, just the soft breeze, friends' laughter, and Alex and Emma's vows, words promising not perfection, but companionship through challenges. When Emma said, "You are home, and I choose to stay with you every day," Mary felt silent tears roll down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from realizing true love needed no extravagance, just sincerity. The reception unfolded in the garden with wooden tables covered in white linen and family-style dishes, toasted bread, slow-roasted meat, and a green salad Mary helped Emma choose. Soft jazz played, not drowning out the lively chatter. Mary moved between tables, talking with Alex's old friends and Emma's family, feeling a connection she thought she'd lost forever. When Emma's friend said, "You're amazing, Mary. This garden, everything. It's perfect in the most authentic way," Mary smiled, her heart full. Near the reception's end, Alex and Emma approached Mary. Alex hugged her, a tight, lingering embrace. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, voice choked. "Today, it's everything I wanted." Emma placed a hand on Mary's shoulder, her eyes shining. "Mrs. Mary, you are the soul of this day. I can't imagine it without you." Mary said nothing, only smiled. But inside, she knew this moment, genuine recognition, not for her sacrifices, but for being herself, was what she'd waited for all these years. Mary stood alone by the garden's edge as the party ended, watching Alex and Emma hold hands, laughing under the lanterns. They didn't dance a flawless dance or pose for Instagram. They were themselves, clumsy but joyful, and Mary felt a deep happiness. She'd stayed in her lane, but it wasn't a limitation. It was the path leading her to a place where she was loved, not for giving, but for being Mary. Back home, Mary sat at the kitchen table that night, opening her green notebook. She wrote, "Today, I wasn't just a mother or a planner. I was Mary, and I am enough. I found family not in expectations, but in sincerity." She closed the notebook, looking out the window where moonlight lit the bare branches. She thought of William, his smile from their wedding years ago, knowing he'd be proud. Mary rose, brewing a final cup of tea, and sat on the porch. The autumn breeze carried the scent of the earth. She no longer waited for Alex's apology or anyone's validation. She'd found herself a strong woman who'd overcome betrayal, learned to love without losing herself. Mary knew she'd seen her true home in the night's stillness, not in the white wooden house or a perfect wedding, but in her heart.